Right.
Let me know when you're going to know.
Sorry.
We'll get started. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Would you please rise? Let me know when you're going to know.
Sorry.
We'll get started. One nation. I'd like to thank everybody in the audience for coming out this evening. We're right from winter to summer, so we appreciate you being here. Can we have the treasurer, the secretary, please call the roll? I'd like to thank everybody in the audience for coming out this evening. We're right from
Trustee Kevin Martin.
winter to summer, so here.
Aaron Fellers.
Absolutely excused.
Jeffrey Jar.
Here.
Charles LaRock.
Absolutely excused. We have a quorum. Thank you. If there's no additions to the agenda, the chair will accept the motion for the agenda to be accepted.
I make a motion to accept the agenda for tonight.
Support. Support by any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise, motion carried. Approval of the minutes.
I'd like to make a motion for the approval of the minutes for March 14, 2023.
Support by trustee Martin.
Discussion.
Discussion.
I'd like to propose a
Yep,
change.
motion made and supported, but discuss it, didn't work.
Absolutely. I'd like to propose a change to the meeting minutes.
Okay.
Page, it's labeled 5 of the meeting minutes. There's a statement made under board comments jar. The second line beginning, because our hydroelectric generation, and goes on about the approvals. I'd like to point out that the N in that word should be a comma. I was clarifying the approvals, not condemning them. Thank you. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Any other corrections? Doesn't. It's okay, by the motion maker and the second to accept this clarification. Accept it? Okay. We'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. The minutes carry affirmatively. Any correspondence? Anybody in the board? Seeing none? Okay. Public hearing on a new business item, case number 23-014, dimensional height variance. Requested by Lawrence Zelenka, 13125 Foreman Drive. The request is for a dimensional variance by Lawrence Zelenka to construct a 2.5-story home that is approximately 29.6 feet tall. The subject property is located at 13125 Foreman Drive, and the tax parcel is listed. Located on the east side of Foreman Drive between Edgar and Ellen Avenues. The property is zoned R1B, single family residential district. The request is contrary to the requirements of section 3.106D of the zoning orders as described below. Section 3.106D, R1A, R2A, R1B, and R1C, single residential family district, dimensional regulations. The maximum allowable height is 30 feet or 2 stories, whichever is more restrictive per section 1.106 of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance. The proposed height approximately and not to exceed 30 feet. Proposed height stories 2.5. Variance requested 1.5 story. And we can open a public hearing, motion to do so.
Mr. Chair, I move to open the public hearing.
Second one. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Anybody from the public that has a comment? If you do, please come up to the podium and state your name and address for the record, so we know, who you are.
My name is Tim Stavis. I live at 1314 in Ormond. And I live next door to where Larry's gonna build a home. I was here 3 years ago. And he came in for a variance. He wanted to be closer to my home. And I went for the board here and I requested that. I had photos and pictures of trees and stuff in his yard, and the board here said that he had to remove a shed and remove the trees before he was given a building permit. Well, the shed's still up and the trees are still there, some of them. Okay, that's not really why I'm here. I'm here because he went to everybody's house in the neighborhood with a print. Never came to my house and showed me the print. How he's gonna build a home, the height of the home, where it's gonna start and where it's gonna end. And that's a concern to me. I live next door. I have 2 decks. I think that's important to me. But he bypassed me. And, I'm here for that reason. First of all, I didn't do what he was supposed to do. And now he's, requesting something else. And it's like I'm left out of the picture. I don't understand it. So I would like to see, the print, where it's gonna start on the property line and where it's gonna end. And, the height of the deck and where it's gonna, face it. Everybody else got that opportunity. I did not.
Okay, I don't know if we had extra copies available.
Yes, I would be glad to share, if you'd like, I have one copy that I can. And that's just overall representation. Through the chair,
Yes.
I'll mention that I'm glad to put the plot plan on the screen during a staff presentation of tonight's request, as well as the 4-sided view of the renderings that were provided to the board recently, as well as the elevation drawing showing the structure.
Was this available to the public?
In the packet for tonight's meeting, the packet included the elevation drawing that showed the height of the building. There were some, we did not include some of the renderings in the packet, because there was a consistency with one of the items on the rendering, the elevation drawing. So the builder agreed to provide an updated renderings, just for tonight's meeting for presentation. So essentially what's on what was posted on the public website last week, which the board had access to, was just recently updated. So everybody's getting the updated information all for tonight's meeting, including the members of the public. In terms of having some additional renderings.
My concern was that, this is the first apparently that we heard of, the neighborhood hasn't had an opportunity to see any of this, but if it's been available, but I would hope that it would contact the township and find out what's going on next door to us. I'd like everybody to know what's going on, especially if it's next door to you, but on the other hand, a little involvement, a little, help. It's a lot more helpful than coming here at the last minute and trying to find out what's going on. That's my comment. I mean, everybody else has any comment.
The elevation drawing that was in the packet was available last week on the website.
All right. Our aim is to let everybody know what's going on. Not supposed to be a secret. Yes, trustee Martin. Yes.
Do we take a vote?
Yes, we had a motion and a second. Okay, any other comments from the public or, yes, Lenore? Yeah, come on back up. Lenore, you would ask.
You know, there's no measurements here, where, you know, where it's gonna be from the road, where it's gonna be from my home, my neighbor's home. And then, you know, like the back of the house.
Sir, I think he said when during your presentation, you'll see the site plan during the staff's presentation.
Oh, you're gonna do that then?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
there's minimum setbacks.
yeah, I apologize, and I thought it would be on here.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's requirements of the zoning orders regardless. Okay. You know what other comments, motion for the public? Oh, I'm sorry, Lenore, I'm sorry.
There. My name is Lenore Ransom. And I live on 3.
There you go.
My name is Lenore Ransom. And I live at 13132 Herman Drive across from Larry Salenka's property. And I've been living there almost 24 years. I've known Larry for over 30 years. He has been a music director at our church in Belleville and in many churches from our area. I've known him to be a very good, standing person. And he has had this property for many years in his family. And now in his age of life, him and his wife Mary would like to build their dream home on that property. This is the request for this dimensional variance. He's to build a 2.5-story home. I believe.
That's correct.
Is that right? Okay. And it's approximately, and the request for the dimensional variance by Lawrence Salenka to construct 2.5-story home that is approximately 29.6 feet tall. So that is below. Right. The top part of his home will be facing the lake, just like the neighbors on either side of him. And one of them is here. Their top of their home faces the lake, which, you know, I have no problem with that. And I just feel that this is something that when you own property, and yes, maybe he's had stuff there that has been left there through the years, but I'm sure when Larry and Mary are able to have this home built, and it costs a lot of money to build this house, and it will be an asset for our neighborhood. And I just feel that you reconsider this request for this variance. We all work hard in our life to have our dream home. And for somebody to try to take it away from you, it's inconceivable. We all want our dream home, you know, and that's what I came here to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I follow Lenore because we've been friends for a lifetime, so I'm sorry to be that personal and close to the people. More than half of these people I've known for years. All right. See no further public comment, motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion that we close the public hearing. Support.
There's a motion and supported. All in favor, say aye.
Mr. Chair?
Oh,
Excuse me.
sorry.
We should probably check, since we're on
Oh, I'll
Zoom, we should
do that
check if there are any
too.
remote participants.
Yes, thank you, Member Jar. As a reminder, we are still doing kind of a hybrid meeting format. We do allow the public to participate remotely via Zoom. Just a kind of a housekeeping message here. If anybody is on Zoom and you have anything you'd like to add, please raise your virtual hand, enter something into the chat, or *9 if you're calling on the phone. From my observation, the person on attending remotely tonight is affiliated with the applicant, it's the architect for the applicant, so I'm sure as part of the presentation by the applicant, if he has anything to add, you could add it at that time as well. But otherwise, there are no public comments on Zoom right now that I can see. Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is unfinished business.
Did we finish the vote on the?
Oh, well, I'm sorry. Yep, unfinished.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no,
Chair.
we'll get this done.
Yeah.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed likewise, and this motion carried. On the new business, it's the same request that we have before, but it's a dimensional height variance. That's the request for a home on Norwood Drive. I won't go through all the details that we went through before. So I'd like to start with a presentation from my township staff, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, board, and thank you, everybody who was able to attend tonight's meeting. I'll start with an image on the screen, just of the rendering that I think now everybody has at their disposal. And I'll toggle between this and a view of what's called the plot plan, which shows the layout of the site, which was referenced by a gentleman earlier, which is on this image here. And this may be a good place to start. I have reviewed in coordination with our township planning consultant, who has also reviewed this report and has discussed this case with myself and our municipal services director. I've reviewed the referenced application submitted by Lawrence Zelenka for a dimensional height variance to allow a 2.5-story single-family residential dwelling to be constructed. Information regarding the parcel, I'd like to just go over some background regarding the parcel that's the subject of this request. It's a 0.179 acre parcel, roughly 7,800 square feet. Parcel ID was cited by the chair. The subject property is located at 13125 Ormond Drive, which is in the original Edgewater Heights subdivision. So I have a copy of the original Edgewater Heights subdivision map in your packet tonight. The zoning of the property is R1B, single family residential district. And the parcel is currently unimproved except for the remaining shed that was referenced earlier. There was a previous home with a ground floor area, 604 square feet, that was demolished in between 2018 and 2019. As part of this project, as you can see on this plot plan, the applicant proposed to construct a approximately 2,000 square foot home, that's floor area, with a height of roughly 29 foot 8 inches as measured at the halfway point between even the peak of the roof. This is a dimensional variance request based on the requirement in our zoning ordinance regarding the number of stories single family residential dwellings are allowed to have in this zoning district, and I'll go over that shortly. But because this is a dimensional variance request, this required a public hearing, which is why we had a public hearing earlier. The public hearing notice was published in Belleville Area Independent on March 22nd in accordance with the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, and notices were mailed to owners of real property within 300 feet on March 23rd. To discuss the nature of the variance request, I'll move over this image. Under section 3.106D of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance, all of the single family residential zoning districts are subject to a maximum allowable height requirement that includes both height in feet and height in stories. So a single family residential dwelling is not permitted to exceed 30.0 feet in height or 2.0 stories, whichever is more restrictive per section 1.106 of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance. If the BZA recalls, this was the consensus of a previous interpretation that was discussed regarding the language of the zoning ordinance. And the consensus was that the prudent route would be to look at the language regarding that requirement, but also to proceed with assuming that this request would require an appeal or a variance from the requirement based on the number of stories exceeding the 2.0 stories. So that's why we're here tonight. Again, the proposed height, I mentioned that it's approximately not to exceed 30 feet. Just to give a little bit of leeway in case there's some minor tweaks to this design, staff will ensure that if this variance request is granted, that it will not exceed 30 feet in height. The dimensions that you see in your packet are roughly 29.6 feet in height. And again, the proposed height is 2.5 stories. So the requested variance is for a half story to be constructed above the second full story in the dwelling. For a little bit of background, I'm going to add to the background I provided in this packet just to reference that there was a variance request heard by the BZA several years ago in 2018 or 2019 regarding a setback issue. And just to clarify to the BZA, by way of just informing you the outcome of that, that issue was addressed through a eventual zoning ordinance text amendment regarding setbacks on lakefront parcels. There's a specific zoning ordinance text amendment that addressed a more scalable standard for side yard setbacks on lakefront parcels with narrow frontage like this one. And so this, the plot plan that you see in your packet tonight demonstrates compliance with current zoning ordinance standards, which require a percentage-based side yard setback based on the proportion of the width of the lot. So I believe it's that one side cannot be less than 15% of the width of the lot, and the combined two sides cannot be less than 30%, and those thresholds are met. But that is not why we're here tonight. We're here tonight to discuss the height variance. And so to give you a little bit more background on that, the BZA had, again, reviewed this on March 14th, determined that the request had to be routed through a review process that required a variance. This was initially brought up through a resubmitted building permit application that staff reviewed after an initial building permit was issued and had expired in 2019 for the construction of this home. So once that building permit application had expired, a new building permit application was submitted this year, and in reviewing the application, the building official, myself and other staff and the planning consultant reviewed this issue and saw that there was some ambiguity in what we interpreted the zoning ordinance language to be, which prompted a review that resulted in the finding that the more stringent standard between number of stories and number of feet in height would apply. And so the request culminated in a review that we have before us tonight. The BZA on March 14th requested that the applicant work to apply to seek a variance from section 3.106D and to work with the planning commission or directed staff to work with the planning commission to consider a zoning ordinance text amendment to clarify whether the two-story limit should apply across the R1 districts, and that is what is currently being reviewed in a parallel fashion with the planning commission. But again, the applicant was given the option to apply for a variance while that review is ongoing. And so now I'll turn my comments over toward specific comments regarding the variance request. And per section 12.403C of the Township zoning ordinance and the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, the board, prior to acting on a proposed variance, must consider and make findings regarding several factors around practical difficulty and several findings around the criteria required to grant the variance in Van Buren Township. The first finding around practical difficulty is that strict compliance with the area, setbacks, frontage, height, bulk, or density would unreasonably prevent the owner from using the property for a permitted purpose and would thereby render the conformity unnecessarily burdensome for other than financial reasons. The subject site is roughly 7,800 square feet and is non-conforming with regard to a minimum lot area requirement of 10,000 square feet for the R1B zoning district. This limits the buildable area of the parcel. The proposed dwelling has a footprint of 1,056 square feet, and the minimum required floor area for a dwelling in the R1B zoning district, excluding decks, patios, porches, breezeways, attached garages, basements, and other spaces not heated or intended for dwelling purposes, is 1,500 square feet. Now, when you look at the maximum permitted lot coverage on a parcel in the R1B zoning district, it is 30%, which in this case would be 2,339 square feet. The proposed dwelling is well within the lot coverage limits and complies with the required setbacks. And I will describe how the floor plan includes, what the floor plan includes, and in later findings in my report, I'll discuss how the building is constructed more vertically than horizontally, which is part of why it was designed in this way that requires a variance request. The applicant's floor plan includes an attached garage and studio space on the first level, master bedroom, living room, bathroom, and kitchen on the main level, and a loft bedroom and bathroom on the third story, which is effectively the half story above the second story. These improvements are built vertically into the home across 2.5 stories rather than with a floor plan across 1 or 2 stories, which would occupy a larger footprint on the site. So tying back to some unique area constraints on the site, this plan responds to those by building vertically. The second finding for practical difficulty is that a variance would do substantial adjustments to the applicant as well as to the other property owners in the district. However, the BZA may determine that a reduced relaxation would give substantial relief and be more consistent with justice to others. I will say that requesting the ability to accommodate a second bedroom within an existing building design would provide substantial justice to the applicant. The BZA should consider a substantial justice will be granted for other properties in the district if this situation was replicated across similar parcels in the R1B zoning district. I encourage the BZA to consider could be justified in including a half story with a loft in lieu of attic or void space above the home's second story. The third finding for practical difficulty is that the plight of the owner is due to the unique circumstances of the property. And again, I'll restate some of the findings from the first criterion. The subject property is just about 7,800 square feet in area with a width of 50 feet. It was an original platted parcel from the 1929 Edgewater Heights subdivision. With limited lot width and area, the room for horizontal expansion at the ground level is limited, and ground floor area is limited. Again, no more than 30% of the lot area can be covered with roof structures. So the BZA may consider whether these factors uniquely constrain the parcel in a manner that justifies building vertically rather than horizontally. The fourth finding of practical difficulty is whether the problem is self-created, and the BZA must find that it is not self-created. And again, this was a platted subdivision that was platted and subdivided in 1929. The applicant demolished a structure that was incompatible with the current zoning ordinance minimum requirements for floor area and pursued a building permit with guidance of staff in compliance with all zoning ordinance requirements other than the maximum allowable number of stories. I would encourage the BZA to consider the existence of the legal non-conforming lot and consider that that is not a self-created issue in and of itself. It could be also argued that the applicant's proposal eliminates a greater non-conformity in terms of dwelling size on the site. I will now go through the standards of approval for granting a dimensional variance. The first is that the proposed appeal or variance is related to the valid exercise of police power and purposes which are affected by the proposed use or activity. Zoning is a valid exercise of this police power. Whether the proposed appeal or variance will not impair an adequate supply of light and air to adjacent property or increase the congestion in public streets. The proposed height in feet meets the current zoning ordinance requirements. Whether or not a half story is approved, the resulting height of the structure can remain the same. I do want to emphasize that. Approving the variance is not likely to impair the supply of light and air to the adjacent property. The proposed vertical construction will likely reduce certain impacts on neighboring properties related to visibility of the lake due to it occupying a smaller horizontal footprint on the site than a larger home with a greater footprint would. Assuming the half story is 528 square feet in area and the second stories are roughly 1,056 square feet, having the home, a single story home could roughly double the footprint. Having a two-story home could significantly increase the footprint as well. The proposed half-story loft bedroom would not likely increase the congestion in the abutting streets, in addition to not being likely to increase adequate air and light. Similarly, the request would not likely increase the hazard from fire or flood or endanger the public safety. The proposed dwelling meets the required minimum front, side, and rear yard setbacks, including minimum separation from adjacent dwellings, which is part of the building code. I will take an opportunity here to mention that there were letters from some of the neighboring property owners that were signed, or a petition that was signed. And I mention that here because some of the concerns that are raised sometimes reveal themselves through these criteria regarding light, air, compatibility with adjacent property. And so I just want to mention those are also comments of concern by the neighbors in many cases as well. So just to kind of tie back to some of the public comment that we've heard and some of the letters you might see in the packet. The fourth criterion for granting a dimensional variance is that it will not unreasonably diminish or impair established property values within the surrounding area. This is difficult to measure, but the requested variance is not anticipated to diminish or impair surrounding property values. The fifth is that the requested variance will not in any other respect impair the public health, safety, comfort, morals, or welfare of the inhabitants of the township. Whether or not the requested variance is granted, the dwelling's height in feet would be permitted as proposed. So granting the variance would not in any other respect impair the public health, safety, comfort, morals, or welfare of the inhabitants of the township. The sixth of seven, I'm almost done getting there. The sixth of seven is that the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. And here is where there are a couple of conditions proposed in the staff report to ensure that this would be met if the BZA is inclined to grant the requested variance. If the variance is granted by the BZA, staff recommends that, and when I say staff, this is a consensus with our planning consultant and myself, the proposed building plan will be closely reviewed by staff for compatibility with the architecture of the surrounding homes per section 5.114F of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance. And therefore, the requested variance is not likely to alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Staff also recommends that the applicant explore the addition of dormer windows on a half-story level to break up the mass of this level on the sides of the house. And my understanding from the applicant's architect is that they are intending to do that, to have dormer windows on that upper level adjacent to that protrusion you see on the screen, which is it's actually an elevator to get to the upper story. So there's proposed to be a dormer window, and if you saw in the previous packet, the previous building permit, there were dormers on the initial permit application as well. Lastly, that the variance is necessary to meet the intent and purpose of zoning regulations is related to the standards established in the zoning ordinance for the use of land or the activity under consideration, and is necessary to ensure compliance with those standards. And I reiterate that the purpose of zoning regulations is to provide for orderly and planned use of land, and for BZA to grant the requested variance They must find that the variance will continue to fulfill the purpose of the zoning regulations and to provide for the orderly and planned use of the land. At this point, I recommend that the BZA carefully review all of the standards for granting a dimensional variance, including the 4 findings for practical difficulty and the 7 listed standards of approval. If the BZA agrees that these criteria have been met relative to this case, the variance may be granted on the conditions that the applicant will work with staff to ensure the proposed dwelling meets the standards for aesthetic compatibility and design and appearance with other residences in the area, and that the applicant explore the addition of a dormer window or dormer windows on the half-story level to break up the mass of this level along the sides of the house. I have provided a motion that I strongly encourage the BZA to use to assist in their decision-making. And if you look at the way that the motion template, the motion template is written, anything that's kind of, depending on who makes the motion, if you're reading the underlying statement, it would be in the affirmative in favor of the variance. And if you're reading the italicized version of the statement, it would be contrary to granting the requested variance. So that motion template is on page 31. If anybody's looking to get that motion. But I'm sure there's a lot of good discussion to be had. So that's the staff comments. I know the applicant is here and their architect is attending remotely, and they want to speak on the case as well. And otherwise, we'll go back and forth. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the presentation by the applicant. Does the applicant wish to speak on this? If not, we'll move on to.
If you'd like to speak, please go to the microphone.
My name is Mary Checanese. It's my husband, Larry Zelenka. We own 13125 Farm Drive in Belleville, Michigan. We would like to seriously request that the board vote in favor of this variance so that we can have this home. Because of the lot size, it really is impossible to have a regular floor plan as Dan suggested in our home. And so in order to do that, to have 2.5 stories would help that. And it will not damage. In fact, it will help the neighborhood by having this dwelling there instead of an empty lot. We thank you for your time and for your consideration.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience? Okay, seeing none. I'm opening up to the voting board. Anybody wants to start, or anybody wants me to start? Go ahead. Who's on to speak first? Anybody have anything to start?
Mr. Chair, I have a question for staff.
Okay.
Director Power, we had a notification list in the packet. That's the 300-foot notification radius for everyone that was notified, and given instructions on how to access packet, the data. And when did that go out?
That was March 23rd.
And that was within the notification windows?
Yes.
Got it. Okay, so the applicant may not have passed out a flyer to all of his neighbors, but the township did the due diligence of notification, correct?
Yes. That's right. The notification requirement is 15 days in advance of the meeting. That was
Also, the head of the publicized in the paper as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Everything was handled properly on
this. Thanks. Okay, sir.
Thank you. Let me restate that I know most of these people here for years. I've lived in the township 40+ years, so I do not consider myself as a conflict of interest in this. So any other more things I do, I'll recuse myself, but otherwise, I'll follow the proper protocols and procedures. Okay, all right. Anybody have any further discussion? Seeing none?
Mr. Chair, I'd say.
Yeah, motion is in order.
That the planning commission did, at its previous meeting, I'm the planning commission representative, so I'll say that, the last planning commission meeting, we did direct staff to look into the issue, the wider issue of allowing 2.5-story houses in R1B and other residential districts. We've not had the formal report back from staff, but I see that the same memorandum that we'll be discussing in tomorrow's meeting was included in tonight's packet. And my initial read, I know it wasn't part of the staff presentation, but my read of McKenna's packet is that they find no detrimental effects, because I should probably just read the bottom end of it to be the right way to do it. That in conclusion, our consultant did not find that allowing for half stories while maintaining nominal height standards for single family districts will have a detrimental effect to the surrounding neighborhoods or public health, safety, and welfare. The township has very stable neighborhoods with several subdivisions of housing developments, and more of these projects to come, ensuring the community has desirable yet reasonable provisions for single family homes and their overhead storage needs will benefit residents and developers, allowing for higher and better use of these low density areas and lessening confusion while designing single family dwellings. I'm reading that from our consultant's memorandum of April 2nd, 2023. I want to clarify the planning commission hasn't met on this issue yet, but it is on the schedule for tomorrow's meeting to discuss.
Okay, on my comments after the voting on this, certain announcements, I have a directive to the planning commission staff to do this step. Okay,
Good chair.
yes, trustee Lerner.
Director Power, on the subdivision plat, could you point out the lot in question for me, please?
Yes, I will, to have to zoom in, because I know it's a small view. Rotate that as well. It is lot 59, and so I'm gonna zoom in. Yes, it's right in the middle of that stretch.
Okay. Just one thing I'm concerned with is the height. I know it's under 30 feet, but they're going to be cutting pretty close. So I want to make sure that we stay under that height requirement of 30 feet. I agree that the house is going vertical instead of horizontal, is probably the best use of the land because of the setbacks. They really can't go any wider. I just want to make sure that they stay under that 30-foot threshold.
Chair?
Yes.
I have a comment related to setbacks. For me, it's not that there's a setback issue. In any lot, you have to maintain the setbacks. You have to within the setbacks. What sets this apart is that the lot itself is legal non-conforming, was platted 94 years ago. It's a very, I mean, by today's 2023 standards, it's a very small lot. And in 1929, you could build small cottages on those lots, no problem. Now we have zoning regulations that in 2023 have certain requirements for building a 2023 compliant home, not necessarily compatible with a 1929 parcel. And I do think that this is a special condition. This is a special case, not self-created. It is it is a facet of the land that needs to be taken into consideration, and is why we have a zoning board of appeals for just this fact.
That's correct. Thank you. Any further discussion? Division.
I have one concern, but I think at the time, about 3 or 4 years ago, John was talking about earlier. But with the ambiguities that we encountered with that case at that time versus today, I can see clearly that now that this is different than what it was then. Had it been the same, I wouldn't have had a problem with it, but because it's different, because of the ambiguities that we found in the system, I completely understand it. And I think what Mr. Jordan may have said, cleared up even more stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair.
Mr. Haas.
Yeah, so I do remember this case. This was actually the first case when I became a BZA member. And specifically remember the trees, because I believe that I even brought that up at the last meeting, that I remember this case, and it had something to do with the trees. That case did have to do with setbacks, and I believe that staff even worked with the applicant to not even have to use a variance. They changed the design slightly. I believe this design is slightly different from that one. But there was an agreement that the applicant was going to take care of the trees. I don't necessarily remember the shed, so that may or may not have been part of the previous discussion. But I mean, that's been 4, almost 5 years since we've had those discussions. So if there was no follow through with the applicant, I would have asked the neighbors to follow up with the township if there was any concern with that. And I would hope that the township staff would do exactly what they said and make sure that the structure is aesthetically pleasing for the neighborhood. And if there are any concerns with overhanging trees or anything like that, if you would also take a look at that.
As well, I would like to add that because of the small lot size, they cannot go out with the required setbacks. They can only build up, which is unique to this site, but there's probably more lakefront property or small lots available in the township to be built on or rebuilt on. That just may come up again, hence we'll have additional comments after this agenda item. So I do want to make sure that staff gets involved with the windows on the second and a half story, the top floor, so that it's compatible to the neighborhood as well as whether they build dog houses or whatever, something that looks architectural acceptable to the rest of the neighborhood. So, but I'll leave that up to staff to enforce what they would like it. I don't need to see that again. I'm sure we're capable of handling that in-house as well. Any further comments?
I have one other one.
Yes, go ahead.
In conjunction with Mr. Hobbs stated there. When we run our decision as to what we think, both yea and nay, is there any way we put in the actual motion itself, the stipulation? And I know it doesn't have anything to do with the 30 feet, but a 2.5 story. But can we put something in the motion of that part in which was supposed to have been be taken care of in conjunction with this?
I will, regardless of if you do that or not, I will make sure we account for any conditions that were in place with the 2019 variance request. Typically, the conditions you want to place on a variance should pertain to the matter at hand. So if there's an aesthetic concern with the shed or something that would tie to the architecture of the home that you would be able to justify with this decision, then I think it would be reasonable to include, but I think it's more likely you want to include conditions on the aesthetics and the reducing the bulk or the height and massing of the structure. But I'll absolutely follow up on any conditions that were in place with the previous review and make sure those are handled regardless.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have a question for staff.
Okay.
Does the building staff have to make sure that other structures on the lot, including landscaping, the entire site plan has to conform with the zoning ordinance in order to get a certificate of occupancy in the house? I'm sorry, let me just give you a very particular one. If the shed is not within the correct setback limit, the shed has to go because it's a full site plan redevelopment. Is that correct?
That's an accurate statement. We'd have to take a closer look at that. And, we typically would not want to be able to leave any accessory buildings out as part of the demolition permit. So that's something I would have to investigate. Now, there are exempt, some detached accessory building sheds that are 120 square feet in area are exempt from, certain lot coverage requirements and small sheds are exempt from certain building permit requirements. So that may have been something that just, did not get picked up when the demolition occurred years ago, but, generally, yes, we have to make sure that there's a clean slate to work with for new construction.
Thank you. That answered my question.
Okay. Any further comment? Seeing none, the motion is in order.
So through the chair, I would like to make a motion. So I'd like to make a motion on case 23-014 to approve the request for Lawrence Zabicki for 13125 Orman Drive, tax parcel noted on the document for a variance of 3.106D, R1A, R2A, R1B, and R1C, single family resident district, dimensional regulation. Maximum allowable height 30 feet or 2 stories, whichever is more restrictive. Section 1.106 of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance. Proposed height approximately not to exceed 30 feet. Proposed stories 2.5 stories. Variance requested 0.5 stories. This motion is based on the findings and facts of section 12.403C and D of the Van Buren Township ordinance. Practical difficulty is presented by the following findings. That strict compliance with the setbacks, frontage, height of bulk or density would unreasonably prevent the owner from using the property for permitted purposes and would thereby render the conformity unnecessary, burdensome, for other than financial reasons. 2, that the variance would do substantial justice to the applicant as well as to other property owners in the district. The BZA, however, may determine that a reduction in relaxation would give substantial relief and more consistent with just to others. I'm not sure if that should be included or not. The plight of the owner is due to unique circumstance, and the problem is not self-created. Standards of the approval. In consideration of this approval, all of the proposed variances under this ordinance, the BZA has determined the following. The proposed appeal or variance is related to the valid exercise of police power and purposes are affected by the proposed use or activity. The proposed appeal or variance will not impair an adequate supply of light, air, or adjacent property or increase the congestion in public streets. 3, will not increase the hazard of fire, flood, or endanger public safety. 4, will not unreasonably diminish or impair established property values within the surrounding areas. 5, will not in any other respect impair the public health, safety, comfort, morals, or welfare of the inhabitants of the township. 6, will not alter the essential characteristics of the neighborhood. 7, is necessary to meet the inherent purposes of the zoning regulations, is related to the standards established in the ordinance for the land use or activity under consideration, and is necessary to ensure compliance with those standards.
We have a motion. And we're looking for support by trustee Martin. Any discussion on the motion?
Through the chair.
Trustee Martin.
Looking at the motion template, I see is an area there for conditions, and Commissioner Grissett was they mentioned the fact of the trees or whatever. And I was just looking at the site and they would have to move the trees to build the house anyway, so I don't think that's really, anything we need to add.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Will our recording secretary please do the roll call?
John Herman,
Yes.
Amos Grisette,
Yes.
Kevin Martin,
Yes.
John Haas,
Yes.
Jeffrey Jar.
Yes.
We have 5 ayes and 0 nays. His motion carried. Congratulations. Thank you very much. All right, as I stated earlier, the next items of the agenda are adjournments, comments, and open discussion. I have 2, comments myself, and I believe staff has some clarifications you would like to, administer as well here, so now is your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. There will be a meeting in May, and in advance of the meeting, just wanted to use this time to mention that I know there was some, without going into any details of a pending case that's for the BZA, but I know there was a good conversation and good questions about the specific provisions in the township's Belleville Lake Shoreline District's ordinance regarding exceptions as opposed to variances, which are for generally for cases like this on private property. I did have McKenna Associates look into that and provide a memo that they wrote April 5th that I will provide the BZA in advance of that meeting. So Lydia Christian, the senior principal planner from McKenna, tapped into some knowledge from Sally Hodges, who had done planning for the township when the Belleville Lake Shoreline District's ordinance was written. And they produced a summary memo that may help to provide some clarity on that. So I'll make sure to provide that earlier than later. And then if anybody has questions, as always, feel free to reach out to me directly and we can discuss anything to clarify your questions.
Along those same lines, I would like to know or let staff know who can attend the May meeting. We promised the applicant that we'd have a full board, so I would like a full board at the May meeting if possible. So, as soon as you can, Mr. Pearson have already notified us, and I will be attending, so anybody else that.
I'll be attending.
Okay, okay, so,
I plan on being here, sir. I also have a personal alternate.
okay.
I am stuck, yes, sir. I am stuck.
So for the 2 absentees today are the ones we need to be confirmed, so, all right, so. Yes.
I'll take a big job on that because the same thing you were saying the last time. Sometimes we're so wrapped up and looking down the rifle shot, we don't see the shotgun, how far it can spread out. And I think what happened is that you explained it somewhat to me last month. But I didn't know that we were not just strictly staying with the variance, not extensions or what have you. And I think with what you were saying, in addition to what he said to me earlier, have much better.
All right, thank you. As promised, I have some directives to the planning commission and staff, and also we hopefully going to the trustees, the board of trustees. I'd like to see, the planning commission with the staff and the McKenna Associates to look at our ordinance and clarify 2.5-story building. Especially with lakefront and small, frontage properties, those are only able to build up. And to get the proper today's standards of 3 bedrooms, or a family room and study of whatever, to accommodate those people, 2.5 story is in order. So, but also I'd like to include a 2.5 story for builders or anybody else that wants to build a 2.5 story.
Not,
Which,
Mr. Chair, not just existing structures, but
no,
new construction.
okay,
Gotcha.
or additions to a 2-story house today, if I want to put the door up, but then I want to set limitations. So to put some, ideas out there, I would like to see the people look at a 2.5 story with 35 feet. Our neighboring townships allow 2.5 stories and 35 feet. Or keep it strictly to a 2.5 story on the 30 feet. So those 2 options. You're restricted with lot sizes, for instance. You can add dimensions to the structures like 50% brick as a minimum for 2.5 stories, or even more, but the 2.5 stories, because some of the new buildings today require 50% brick to begin with. So you can increase that to make it look better. So those are some of the items I'd like to discuss, and I'll attend the planning commission meeting if you need me to be there to explain myself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, so I'd like to see that happening. We need to go with the times.
Mr. Chair, you would like the planning commission to consider the ordinance for 2.5 stories, further clarification, possibly including 2.5 stories for additions as well as new construction, perhaps the option of raising the overall height limit to 35 feet, and perhaps considering increased construction standards when the 2.5 story height is being proposed. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, you get the idea.
I'll take it to the board, sir.
I have one question,
Yes.
if I may.
Yes,
Would that be primarily, and I know you explained it very clearly, but would that be primarily looking at new subdivisions and their 35 feet and above, or 35 feet and down, rather than in my neighborhood, most houses are within that 30 feet, and all of a sudden I've got a guy next door to me with a 35 footer.
I'm on planning commission to look at it all and come up with a plan. My job is not to do the planning commission. I suggested the guidance is, I don't want to mandate it, but I would like to see that being taken up.
And that's the function of the BZA. When we on the BZA find issues that need to be addressed, when people bring us building concerns that they have, and perhaps the ordinance needs to be updated, as planning commission has the possibility to look at that, consider it, and come back with a good opinion for our elected officials to act upon. So absolutely, I would take that message back to my commission team.
I would see this coming back here, if we go back on and clarify for the people so they can, we don't hold them up in the process.
We agree.
Yeah, okay, so that was my directive to you.
Gotcha, sir.
Thanks, Pat. All right, that's all I have. Anybody else have any comments or? See you none?
Like to make a motion to close.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I saw a hand raised. I don't know if you want to acknowledge it.
I have one question, if I could say it. So when you build a new home, is there any speculations? As far as your lot looks like stumps and an old, walkway going down that was supposed to be, if you go back to the old record, it's supposed to be all demoed. I mean, he took trees down, but they're all stumps. I mean, it's a breeding ground for rodents. I mean, it is, when you build a house, you have to have your landscaping finished, or can you leave it like that? I mean, I want the man to build a home. I want something there. I'm not denying his home. I mean, I've lived there for 13 years and it's a breeding ground for rodents. I mean, his backyard, he just cut the trees, so far off the ground. I mean, he still has an old dock going down and it's falling down. We're supposed to take it down. It's still there. But I mean, by no means am I not denying it. I want him to build it. I just wanted to clean up his property, which the board said he had to, and it has not been done. So when you build a home, I guess my question is, do you have to make your landscaping like others? Or can you just leave it all just like, you know what I mean, just all, whatever? It was supposed to be removed and it hasn't been done. That's my only,
My concern is here, I'm sorry to confuse you.
yeah,
We're not here for site plan approval.
right, but that was part of the speculations to build, to get a building permit if you go back in the records.
That's up to staff to enforce. I don't see us as a board having that.
I mean, it's a simple question, you know, and maybe you guys can understand me. So when you build a home, you just leave your backyard full of stumps and wildlife and do nothing about it.
Not necessarily, no.
I mean, that's my question. It's a simple question. Or does that need to be cleaned up?
There are specific ordinance definitions for what we call nuisance vegetation,
Right, it shouldn't like others. I mean,
on undeveloped parcels in platted subdivisions, there may be some things that apply regarding tall weeds, brush, but with the construction that's pending, we'll make sure, you know, staff always reviews the full site plan and make sure that there's for example, if there's a soil erosion permit that's required adjacent to the lake shore that the county also reviews. So there's different requirements that apply and make sure that we're reviewing it as a clean slate. For restoration of the site when the construction is done, there are certain requirements as well. So we
Okay.
we monitor that.
my only question. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
We had a motion to adjourn, believe it, that was not debatable, so we need a second.
Second the motions.
We have a motion and support. No discussion, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, likewise. We adjourn at 8:10 p.m.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor.